Today we are going to be making one of my favorite burgers of all time. It's a Chinese hamburger called mifenrou. So essentially it is toasted rice coated pork belly that is super decadent and juicy and soft, and it melts in your mouth. And we put it in like a little fluffy bun of sorts. It's just so good and I can't wait for you to try it. So let's get started. So the first thing we gotta do is to marinate the meat, which will take about 6 hours minimum. But I personally prefer to do this overnight so that I can, cook it in the morning. So for the sake of filming, I have prepared the pre-marinated one from last night, but these freeze super well after you finish a dish. So my dad's really happy. We have like a bunch of these now. So let's do this step first. On the day you're going to eat this, you will be making the dough. So we will do this first and then this. When you buy your pork belly, make sure that it has a, higher content of the lean meat than the fatty part. We are using the skinless ones, but if you like to eat the skin or the rind, that's totally fine as well. In terms of cutting, I like to have them in rectangular slices. The meat does get really juicy and soft, so you don't want to cut them too thin. So to a bowl, you will add in all of your pork belly. For seasoning, we have the most basic foundation of 3, which is sugar, cooking wine, and soy sauce. We will add a little bit of salt for extra savoriness. You need the marinade to be quite strong because the rice will soak up the flavor. We need some dark soy sauce to give it the nice color. These two is what gives it its signature taste. We have 5 spice and white pepper. This is really the taste of my city, where my mom is from. And then just give it a quick toss. Cover that up and let it rest overnight. This is what we have from yesterday's. So this has been marinated for overnight. You can see that the dark soy sauce has given it some color. We're going to set this aside and work on our dough. Okay, so for the dough, the process is exactly the same as the last recipe that I made with the pan-fried soup dumplings. It's a mix of flour with cornstarch, some yeast, baking powder, and sugar. This is our family's foolproof way of making fluffy Chinese buns, so I highly recommend trying this out. I used to hate working with doughs because it's just, I can never tell if it's gonna work or not, depending on like the temperature, the dough, my mood, I don't know. But ever since I tried my mom's bao recipe, perfect every single time, always fluffy. And I kind of explained this in the last video, but I'll explain it again. Basically, the cornstarch gives it that soft texture. The yeast obviously helps it rise, but sometimes, depending on the brand or even how old your yeast is, it might not work to its full potential. So we add baking powder to give it an extra boost, and the sugar feeds it. And the last secret that my mom used is warm, hot-ish water, about 50 degrees. And really the absolute key to getting the best bun is to make sure that you knead the dough all while the water is still warm, and then you cover it up while the dough is still warm and you let it rise. And if you do it this way, it'll only take you about 45 minutes for the dough to double in size. So let's do that. To a bowl, I'm adding in my flour, cornstarch, adding in my yeast directly today, sugar, baking powder. Give it a mix. Immediately, I'm going to add in my warm water while stirring. You want the dough to be kind of soft, so just give it a knead. If you find that there's too much flour left over, just adding a tad more warm water. Just like that. And then keep mixing. Okay, my dough is done. It is still very warm. It's very soft. So you can see it doesn't have to be smooth at all. Just make sure all of the flour is incorporated. And now we're going to wrap it up. Put it in a warm area of your house and let it rise until it doubles in size. Okay, while we're waiting for our dough to rise, we are going to be making our rice coating. This is just normal Chinese rice. I think it's some medium grain. You can use short grain, jasmine, pilaf, doesn't really matter. It's raw rice. And you are going to have a little bit of the Szichuan peppercorn. This was featured in our compound chicken episode. Honestly, it just adds such fragrance to your dish. It's so good. When I was a kid, I used to not like this because they do make your tongue kind of numb, but it adds such dimension to your dish. And yeah, if you've never tried anything with Sichuan peppercorn in it, I highly recommend giving this recipe a go. It's not as numbing as, say, like really spicy Sichuanese dishes. So yes, what you're gonna do is you're going to turn the heat on to about let's start on a high, and then we are going to put in our rice and turn it down to a medium. The goal is to basically turn that into like a golden-ish color. I'm gonna say it'll take about 15 to 20 minutes. No oil, no salt, nothing. Oh, yes, and don't use a non-stick pan. It's going to scratch up the layer at the bottom, which you end up eating, and that's not good for you. We like to use just kind of these stainless steel ones. If you have a cast iron, that's also fine. Yeah, and it goes. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to practice my pan flip, but can definitely just use a spatula. So I'm a little impatient. I'm going to keep mine on a higher heat, maybe like an 8, and sort of just toss it a lot. But if you are not confident with this step, I recommend doing it low, and it'll just take like maybe 5 to 10 minutes longer. Alright, it's been about 20 minutes and we have the rice completely golden and toasty. Look at that beautiful color. So this is what you want to achieve, kind of a pretty uniform golden-ish color. So yeah, that's the color you want to achieve, golden and toasty. The rice is sufficiently full. We are going to pound it. We're going to pound it into kind of like a granular powder, so it doesn't have to be super fine. You think about maybe panko as opposed to like breadcrumb kind of fine. Panko size would be perfect. Now I know not everyone has one of these at home. You could use an old coffee grinder, an old blender, or like a food processor. I say old just because this is not the best for the blade, but if you have a really high power one, go for it. Or you could put it in a bag and kind of like beat it with a rolling pin or a meat mallet. Okay, I might do it half at a time. The technique I like to use is circular plus a little bit of like pressing it down. So we start off kind of like this. And every once in a while, we're gonna like press it down from the side. Just like that.妈，帮我看一下好没好？为什么我每次叫妈狗会下来？你看
也来了。
够不够？
够，但是有的地方就你一次不要放那么多。
还要一点。Okay, so my mom's helping me with grinding the rest of the rice while I go to the dough. So if you're going to make this, basically you don't want to grind too much at one go. It's probably easier to just do it in, I would say, divide it up into 3, or just use an old processor. It's a lot easier than using your hand. But yeah, we get someone to help you. We are gonna go to our dough, which is fully doubled in size now, and it's still warm. Do you see that? It is super soft. Okay, so I'm going to get some more flour, and we're going to knead this out until it is completely smooth. Flour your counter a little bit, not too much. Get some flour on your palm so it's not sticky. Just going to plop this guy out. So we're going to knead it for 2 reasons. One is the bun in this recipe is really smooth on the surface. And the only way to achieve that is to make sure that your raw dough is also smooth. And the second reason is we are going to expel out all the air so that it can rise the second time properly. And really get flour on this part of your palm, because that's where you're using the force. The cornstarch makes the dough really easy to work with because it sort of lowers the gluten content. You don't want to be too aggressive because then that motion sort of tears the gluten apart. You kind of just want to keep going in one direction, and you have this like pull, push, pull, press kind of motion. All right. now we are going to poke a hole in the center and make a big donut. This way I find is the easiest way to divide up your dough. So this recipe is good for 8 baos. This time I'm going to score it. I don't know if you saw my last recipe, but I wasn't too even with that dough. So I'm going to be extra careful today. Make sure that it is completely the same. Need a little bit of flour so they don't stick to each other. Now, just like last time, we are going to expel more air out of this guy by folding them in towards itself. Just do that maybe 20 something times. Turn it over so that it's smooth on the top, and then pull at it with your thumb and your middle finger, keeping the base, the wrinkly side, constantly in contact. This makes it really, really tight and really, really smooth. So we have that. Now you're gonna put it down, press it down. Now we're going to roll this out. Before I do, I'm gonna get some oil. Hold on. Put a little bit of flour on top as well, just a little bit. And then you want to make sure you're aiming for an oval, kind of like this. But the oval should be kind of smaller up top, wider, and then smaller like this. So press it down. And you almost want it to be a little bit thinner in this area and a little bit puffier on the end. When you're at the edge, give it a little pull, like a little tug, so that the top rounds off into a smaller shape. And then later, when we fold it, it looks something like this. I want mine to be slightly bigger. So that is good. Now we're going to brush on some oil, only half of it. Fold it over, and then you have one piece of bun. They are really thin, as you can see, so you want to let it rise inside of the steamer. A little bit on top. Give it a little squeeze so that it's more elongated. Press it down the center, up and down, pushing it towards the ends. That is a good shape for me. Okay, fold it over. So if you see you have some creases like I do, just flip it over to the other side. My 2 trays ready. Whenever you make anything with dough that needs to be like rised a second time, you want to remember your last piece. So for me, it was this piece. I'm going to keep it on the top. Basically, you want them to be fluffy. So I'm going to cover it up so it doesn't dry and just leave it off to the side. And we are going to coat our meat. As you can see, it is still pretty granular, totally fine. And we are going to just coat our meat with that and cook it in a pressure cooker for about 30 minutes. It's okay, it's just flour. Okay, so you want a stainless steel bowl. Don't use glass. You can be very delicate with this and do it one at a time, or you can do it a bunch at a time. My dad really likes the rice to be not powderized and kind of like grainy because he feels like it soaks up more of the meat juice. When you finish each layer, you want to just kind of make sure there are no holes, and then we are going to get a little bit of water. The rice isn't fully cooked, right? And it's going to be quite dry, so just kind of sprinkle it on.
你还要撒一点这面上。对。
So if you end up having leftover marinated juice left over, definitely keep it because that's where all the flavor is. Okay, I can probably fit one more piece. It already smells really, really good. Okay, so that's second layer. Maybe put a little more since we put in all that effort.
4 pieces at the center.
Okay, fine. Add a little bit more just because they taste so good. Okay, so don't put too much at the end because if you have leftover juice, this is when we're gonna add it all in. Okay, so I do have a little bit of the rice left over. When you make this, don't put all your meat in here all at once. Save some of it in like a separate container so you can leave it for future recipes. It's just rice, so it's not gonna go bad. And coat your meat, I guess, a little bit at a time. So because this has now touched the meat and we can't really save it. Okay, now we're gonna go to the pressure cooker. Put some water at the base like this. Put in your bowl. And then we are going to set it for its pressure cook on high pressure and for 30 minutes. And it is good. All right, let's take a look. Do you see that they're much fluffier than before? So this took about 50 minutes. Don't get impatient. You have to kind of wait until where they meet each other is really puffy. Do you see that? How it kind of bloops out? So remember to look at the last one you made, okay? Now we're going to go over a pot of cold water. This is important. Turn on to high heat. You want to wait till it starts boiling, then we're going to turn it down to about a 5, so a medium. And we are going to steam this for about 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the size of your bun. And then when it's done, same as last time, don't open the lid, let it sit for another maybe 5 minutes. So I just want to add, the reason why you don't want to do it on high heat is because it's going to immediately puff up and then deflate. So you'll get these like weird bumpy air bubbles. And then my cooker is ready, but you can't open it right after. There's a little button there. Once it goes down, then it's ready. So I'm not gonna touch it for another 15 minutes while we wait for that to be done. And then it'll be finished at the same time. Okay, it's been 8 minutes for me. I'm going to turn off my heat. I'm going to wait about 5 minutes and just let it sit. And I think this is pretty much done. We let it sit for about 20 minutes already. So be really careful, it's really hot. Look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. What do you think? You like it?
味道非常好。好，今天这个超好吃，今天味道一定要放足。
我已经听到好吃了。
真实啊。
Perfect. 太好吃了。
Happy, is it good?
Good. 好吃。
Okay, let's see.
这个你都饿昏。
好了没有？
等会。Okay, go.
太好吃了，好吃了，他说不出话呀。
鲜香入味，软糯可口，配的太好太好。
Oh my god, look at this.
这个里面你要看这中间，
开店就卖这个都不得了。那我吃了啊，
Okay.
不客气。
给你会吃8个。